Today we have a special Austn announcement. Australian Open set to begin on February 8th. If you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to give you a tip, and this video is going to be in 3 parts. First I'm going to go through the details that were announced. The Australian Open will go ahead, but has been pushed back, set for a start date of February 8th. The second part, I'm going to be talking about the general effects on the tournament, and the third, some of the possible implications for the players, the officials and the City of Melbourne. Let's go. Welcome to This Walking Life. I'm the bloke who walks, and today we're in Melbourne, Australia. We're at the home of the Australian Open. This video will be about the details released yesterday for the Australian Open 2021 Grand Slam tournament. The Australian Open will go ahead. It was announced yesterday. The start has been pushed back to February 8th. Players will be able to train during their 14-day quarantine, but they're only going to be able to do that after they test negative to COVID-19 on the 2nd day of isolation. And these arrangements are strict guidelines set by the Victorian Department of Health and Human Services, and this is the only way the Grand Slam can go ahead. Now there's 3 points to take note of if you haven't caught up with the news. The first point is that players will be able to train during the 14-day quarantine, but only after testing negative to COVID-19 on the 2nd day of their isolation. Testing will take place in each player's hotel room only on days 1, 3, 7, 10 and 14. And the players will be able to undertake quarantine in Melbourne from January 15. But it's going to come at a huge cost. Tennis Australia is going to stump up for all charter flights, all player and entourage quarantine costs, all their meals and accommodations. And the tournament's also committed to paying the full $71 million prize money, and they're working with the women's and the men's tours on redistribution of large increases in prize money for the early rounds, which means the likely first round purse is going to be around about $100,000. Not bad money if you can get it. So it's been confirmed yesterday, Wednesday the 2nd of December 2020, that these elite level players will be arriving via chartered flights between January 15 and January 17, 2021. But the quarantine won't start for any player until the last player arrives. So tough luck if you get here first. You'll be sitting around in your hotel room, twiddling your thumbs, or putting your thumbs to work on the latest playbox games. Now once the player tests negative to COVID-19 after the first day of isolation, the player will be permitted to train with one other player from days 2 to 7 of their quarantine. From day 8 of quarantine and after 3 negative tests, players will then be able to practice in groups of up to 4. And not until then. The tournament director of the Australian Open, Craig Tiley, has said that the start date of February 8th will give all the players arriving from overseas and in Australia the best possible preparation for a Grand Slam. All the players will be allowed out of their hotel rooms for a maximum of 5 hours only. They'll be allowed 2 hours on court, 2 hours in the gym and 1 hour to eat on site. But all the movement of the players outside of their hotels will be limited to Melbourne Park and the Albert Reserve Tennis Centre, which is located pretty much smack bang in the middle of the Australian Formula 1 Grand Prix track in Albert Park. The Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews went hard earlier on Wednesday morning this week, describing in great detail the risk that international players could reintroduce COVID-19 into the Victorian community. Unlike every other tennis tournament around the world that the men's and women's tours will play this year and in early 2021, only the Australian Open is a tennis tournament in a city where it can be likely assumed that those players will bring the virus here. So pretty strong comments by the Premier. Paris is in lockdown. America's in a mess, with cases rampaging and deaths increasing, and Britain is trying to manage a hodgepodge of restrictions and lockdown tiers across the whole United Kingdom, across 4 different countries. The finer details of the quarantine arrangements are still being finalised. Tennis Australia said on late Tuesday in a statement that the safety of the Victorian community and of those in Melbourne especially was of paramount concern during their confidential discussions with the government. And in a side note to all this news, breaking news that happened yesterday, Stan Wawrinka's coach said players will skip the Australian Open if they can't train here. Fair enough. I'm the bloke who walks, bringing you up to date with the recent announcement of changes. But stick around to the end of this video and I'll tell you where you should be going for all your news and updates on any tennis related content and news, not only in Melbourne but tennis around the world. Well, I'll give you a tip right now. We don't claim to be the go-to online platform for the most up-to-date news for the Australian Open. The second part, I'm going to be talking about the general effects on the tournament. So there you have it. That's the official word announced yesterday in Melbourne. It was touch and go there for a while whether Melbourne would actually even host the Australian Open. It was only barely 4 or 5 weeks ago that we were still coming out of almost the hardest lockdown in the world at the time, and after having 725 active live cases, positive cases, COVID-19 in late July I think it was, today Melbourne has achieved 34 days in a row of 0 COVID-19 cases and 0 deaths, except for one yesterday which was related to an existing COVID long-term case, unfortunately. So if you're a tennis fan, what do you think? Are you happy that it's going ahead even though it's at a later date? You should be. And I can tell you, given all the things that Melbourne sacrificed this year, we lost the footy, we haven't had any cricket, we've only had the Australian Open at the start of 2021. The Grand Prix was cancelled right on the eve of the actual race. We're all pretty pleased. Well, pleased is probably a bit of an understatement. But to have things starting to get back to normal, we're all pretty pleased. One of the disconcerting things, one of the notable things though, is that having lived through this experience of a hard lockdown, a nightly curfew starting at 8 o'clock and only allowed 1 hour's exercise a day for a good 2.5, nearly 3 months, and now having the freedom to almost things back to normal, although you can see that I'm still wearing a mask and I won't be taking that off for any reason anytime soon, because it's a fact of life that COVID is extremely highly transmissible. It's extremely infectious, and it was only a week and a half ago that in Adelaide, in South Australia, COVID-19, the whole state was sent into lockdown for up to a week, and it only ended up being 3 days, simply because one person with infection failed to isolate themselves and continued working at a pizza bar, and a young girl who bought a pizza picked up the infection. So personally I won't be taking the mask off for some time, and as life gets back to normal here, as the Premier said in his statement, that we're at risk of the virus being reintroduced into the Australian community, never mind Melbourne and Victoria. So it was interesting to see an interview with one of the top Australian tennis players last month, John Millman, who was saying that basically the international tennis players just can't get their head around the fact that these strict quarantine restrictions have to be imposed on everyone, no matter whether you're in the top 10 or whether you're an unemployed middle-aged man or woman living in Melbourne. So personally, I'm pretty happy that these arrangements have been struck and these compromises have been made, but I'm still highly aware that the attitude to the risk of reinfection is quite minimal in terms of being aware of how your behaviour affects other people. And we only have to think back to the middle of the year, or just before the middle of the year, when a tournament was organised by Novak Djokovic, and that didn't really go well, with a number of top tier tennis players testing positive to COVID-19. So you would hope that they would learn their lesson, and you hope that they would respect and appreciate the effort that this community has gone to, that we can actually even consider having the tournament, which, as I said 5 or 6 weeks ago, didn't even look like a possibility. It looked like a dream, because our infection rates just weren't going down hard enough or fast enough. Personally, I couldn't be happier that the tournament's going ahead, and it'll be a great way for us to continue rebuilding our routines and lifestyle back towards normality. It's been an amazing experience to live through this year, really unique, really challenging, and if you're in America, Canada, Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, Brazil, my heart goes out to all of you with the tough conditions and restrictions ahead of you and that you're currently dealing with. I hope that the Australian Open is just one of those things that you can latch onto for a little while to take your mind off a very difficult period, a unique period in history. From my own experience, COVID-19 had me glued to the screen watching the French and US Opens, and that certainly took my mind off things. So I guess that's about it. Welcome to Melbourne, Australia, and welcome to This Walking Life. I'm the bloke who walks, and welcome to this video, which is a talking video, not a walking video, bringing you up to date with the recent announcement of changes to the start date of the Australian Open Grand Slam tournament for 2021. Well, I'll give you a tip right now. We don't claim to be the go-to online platform for the most up-to-date news for the Australian Open, but stick around to the end of this video and I'll tell you where you should be going for all your news and updates on any tennis-related content and news, not only in Melbourne but for tennis around the world. If you're a new viewer to this channel, subscribe to this channel. It's not just about tennis, it's about Melbourne, to share the best of this city with people around the world. The personality and culture of Melbourne is premium on this channel. I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel. It's not just about tennis, it's about Melbourne, and it's my goal to share the best of this city with people around the world through this content channel. Please come back again, and we hope that where you are, there's lots of Christmas cheer ahead for you and into the new year. So to finish off, I did say at the start of this video that I'd have a tip for you. There's no way known that I'll ever claim this channel as the go-to place for news about tennis or news about anything, to be honest, but I do want to give you a tip. If you're looking for the most current, up-to-date news from one of the best sports broadcasters, not just in Melbourne or Australia, but covers international tennis around the world, I'd encourage you to tune into a podcast called The First Serve that you can find on Apple or Google or Spotify or any podcast platform. The First Serve, presented by Brett Phillips, a Melbourne-based tennis broadcaster and sports broadcaster. And The First Serve has a number of other podcasts within their channel content. One of them being Aussies Only, if you're a fan of Alex de Minaur, Ash Barty, Alex Bolt or Jordan Thompson. If you listen to Aussies Only, you can also catch up on where Thanasi Kokkinakis is with his tennis career, the up-and-comers of the Australian sporting landscape in the tennis environment. So that's all from me for this video. I'm hoping that this video, this news bulletin of this Australian Open announcement is of some value to you, even if you're not a tennis fan, and even if you're not a fan of this particular channel. But I hope you'll become one, and I hope you'll join me on other walking video tours. I plan to highlight the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, the Australian Formula 1 Grand Prix, amongst other things coming up, and some places of interest, obvious interest and not so obvious, around the city of Melbourne and possibly on the outskirts. I'm the Bloke Who Walks. This channel is This Walking Life, and thank you for watching, listening and sharing would be much appreciated. Bye for now. And we hope that where you are, there's lots of Christmas cheer ahead for you and into the new year.